Hocus Pocus by Pegasus Rescue Brigade, Chapter 4. A hoof poked Dinky ever so gently in the side. The filly did her best to ignore it. The hoof poked again, and then a third time. Dinky groaned and shifted beneath the covers.
9 more minutes, Mom,
she grumbled, rolling over.
Okay.
Responded a apologetic voice that was definitely not Dinky's mom.
I just didn't want to keep you late.
Dinky rolled over and opened her eyes. Even with her vision still blurry from sleep, it was easy to tell that she wasn't in her usual bedroom. She blinked a few times and remembered suddenly that she was at Celestia's academy, and it was Honeydew, not her mom, standing by her bedside.
Oh, morning, Honeydew,
she greeted softly.
Good morning,
Honeydew replied.
I do want to wake you, but we're going to be late for class if you don't get up. Most of the colts and fillies have probably already gone to the main hall for breakfast.
Dinky glanced out the window, realized her roommate was right. The sun was higher in the sky than she would have liked.
Is Clarity awake?
She asked. Heidi shook her head. Dinky climbed out of bed and shimmied up the ladder to Clarity's bunk. She took a look at her roommate and couldn't help but snicker. Clarity was lying on her back with all 4 legs in the air, like a dog waiting to have its belly rubbed. Her ample mane was a mess. The wavy hair spread itself haphazardly all over her pillow. Her mouth hung open a tad, and a little drool was running down her cheek. Dinky poked Clarity in the ribs. One of the sleepy filly's hind legs twitched, but she didn't stir. Dinky shook her gently, but she simply rolled onto her stomach, burying her face into the pillow in the process.
Wake up, sleeping beauty,
Dinky said loudly. Clarity's ear twitched, and she lifted her head. What do you want? She asked, not bothering to push her mane out of her eyes.
We're late,
Dinky said curtly.
Get up, or we're going to miss our first class.
What? Clarity glanced out the window, just as Dinky had. Oh, pony feathers, you're right! Move over! Dinky climbed back down the ladder, and Clarity quickly followed. The gray filly immediately made for her suitcase. But Dinky stopped when she noticed Honeydew was not only awake, but fully groomed and ready for class.
How long can you been up for, Honeydew?
Dinky asked skeptically.
About 3 hours.
Honeydew said matter-of-factly. 3 hours? Clarity gasped. Why?
I'm used to getting up at sunrise,
said Honeydew simply.
Though maybe now I'm not living at home, I could try sleeping in now and then. What did you do for 3 hours?
Dinky asked, shocked. Honeydew shrugged. Watched the sunrise. Styled my mane a bit, packed my saddlebags. Reviewed my schedule. You know, little things. Clarity pushed her headrest out of her suitcase with a brief magical flash and began to yank it through her disastrous-looking mane. Well, good for you, seizing the day and all that, she laughed. Honeydew smiled and rubbed one of her front hose against the back of the other silently.
Speaking of schedules, my first class is called Practical Magic. Do you have that class?
I'm pretty sure we all do, Clarity said. Practical Magic is required for first-term students.
And we better get going,
Dinky pointed out as he finished grooming her mane and tail as well.
We'll have to skip breakfast today. We're going to bed and move quickly to get there as it is.
The trio of fillies grabbed their saddlebags and made for the stairwell to Weston's tower. It was unusually warm for such an early spring day. Probably would have been an excellent morning to sit outside and enjoy oneself. Dinky and her friends were completely oblivious to the beautiful weather. Unfortunately, as they barreled down the stone pathway, it burst through the big castle doors.
So, Clarity,
Dinky asked. Between sharp breaths as the 3 of them made their way out to the long, marble stairway.
What's this practical magical class all about, anyway?
Well, as my sister would say, it's an accelerated compound course that teaches the use of a group's simpler types of magic and are usually applicable to everyday life, rather than focusing on a simple discipline, Clarity explained. Or, as any normal pony would put it, the kind of magic you see the average unicorn use to perform the everyday task.
Like the sort of things in my beginner's magic guide?
Dinky terrorized, taking her saddlebags to make sure the aforementioned book was tucked safely inside. Sort of like that, but more complicated, Clarity answered. We all already know the simple stuff. The teacher is going to expect that we're already able to easily do things like cast light or carry objects. The trio arrived on the second floor. It took a moment to catch their breath. The vaulted hallway was regularly punctuated with wooden doors, each bearing a golden number.
These must be some of the classrooms,
Dinky guessed.
Honeydew, what room does the schedule say our class is in?
Honeydew scrutinized the sheet of paper.
Room 201 at the end of the hall,
she answered. The three fillies made for the classroom, but stopped short when another trio of ponies appeared from around the corner at the other end of the hall. The Frostfire twins and a little brother, Scuffle. This is your classroom, little bro, Scorch said, motioning the door. We'll see you later. Frosty and I have to head to the, He paused to scratch his head. What was it again? Advanced enchantments, Frosty said, crinkling his nose. Dear Celestia, that class was so dull last year. The twins then trotted off to back the way they came, continuing to complain about their enchantment class. Scuffle waited until they had disappeared, and then turned and entered room 201.
Oh, Scuffle's in that class,
Dinky groaned, her ears drooping in disappointment.
Think he'll try to pick on us again?
Heidi shrunk back.
He's a bully,
she asked meekly. Don't so at you two, Clarity said encouragingly. He won't try anything when there's a professor in the room. Besides, since all the first-term students have to take practical magic, it'll probably be a huge class, unless they have a half-dozen different classes of it meeting throughout the week. Clarity led the way, taking the three fillies into the classroom. The first thing Dinky noticed was the noise. Clarity had been right in her assumption that the class would be large. There were probably 60 or 70 colts and fillies, most of whom were chatting as they sat in the front rows of the wooden desk. The walls of the classroom were adorned with posters and scrolls pertaining to specific spells. Interestingly, only half the classroom was filled with desks. The other half was completely empty. Hi, girls. Take your seats. We are about to start, called a friendly male voice from the front of the room. Dinky looked in the direction of the call and recognized the green unicorn who had introduced the dean at the opening ceremony the night before. He grinned at the fillies and tilted his head subtly to a few open desks on the right side of the room, his greyish mane twisting as he did so. Scuffle had taken a seat across the room, far away from the open desks. He was busy fumbling with his saddlebags, so the fillies had no trouble avoiding him as they trotted to the unoccupied chairs. The professor waited until the girls had taken their seats, then gently closed the classroom door with magic. Good morning, new students, he called. Welcome to your first class at Celestia's Academy for Gifted Unicorns. My name is Professor Morningstar, and I'll be your practical magic instructor for this term. As the professor trotted to a large cabinet near his desk and opened it up, ignoring the cloud of dust that issued forth, his front half disappeared inside as he rummaged around, and Dinky took note of the 8-pointed white star matching his still visible flank. As you might know, he continued, somewhat muffled as he dug through the contents of the cabinet, practical magic is, by the standards of this academy, an easy class. Unlike some of the other classes, which have gradually more advanced interlaces for students in each year, practical magic is a class that you only need to take once. Once you move on to your second term, there will be plenty of electives available to fill the gap it will leave in your schedule. The professor finally pulled his head out of the cabinet, carrying a large pile of textbooks in his hazel-colored aura. He placed the mountain of tomes on his desk with a loud thump. So, let's get right down to business, he said in a peppy tone. This is your textbook, Practical Magic, Advanced Application of Simple Spells. It is also your first assignment. Retrieve the textbooks without leaving your seats. Professor Morningstar watched one by one. The books were enveloped in multicolored light. They levitated across the room and all touched down on the desks. A few books faltered in midair for a moment or two, but none dropped to the floor. Dinky watched as the books she had selected floated beamingly over on his cloud of yellow light and dropped down onto her desk. Not bad, said Professor Morningstar, appreciatively, once all the books had reached their destinations. I suppose this means each of you knows how to perform a basic levitation spell. I dare say you'd probably struggle a bit at this academy if you didn't. Dinky silently thanked Twilight Sparkle again for her lessons. She managed to retrieve her own book with more ease than some of the other ponies in the room, and that left her feeling hopeful. Now, go ahead and set the book aside for now, the Green Stallion called, and get a quill and some paper. It's time for our first and most important lecture in practical magic. The professor then lit his horn and used the chalkboard on wheels came hurling out of the closet, stopping just an inch or two before it could have barreled into the stallion. Unfazed, Morningstar picked up a piece of chalk and scrawled big 5 letters on board. Limit! Limit! The professor said aloud, as if the students didn't realize the acronym was a common word. This is the most important word in studying practical magic. Does anybody know what that is? Dinky had no idea. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Clarity raised her hoof. Yes, you, the little gray blue fitty.
Limit is an acronym, isn't it? Clarity said haughtily. It, helps you remember the different types of practical magic, right?
Exactly right, the professor replied enthusiastically. There are 5 types of magic that make everyday tasks drastically easier for unicorns than they are for Pegasi and Earth ponies. For many unicorns, these 5 types of magic are the only ones they will ever have to learn to use. But here at the Academy, we condense them into a single class, since our students usually find them easier to master. Professor Morningstar drew a circle around the L. So, who can tell me what the first type of practical magic is? At least a dozen hands were raised. The professor called on the most studious-looking orange coal in the classroom.
Levitation,
he answered. Correct! The professor said, swishing his tail in satisfaction, as he scrawled on the levitation on the board. Levitation is one of the easiest and most straightforward types of magic we know of. Many fools learn to levitate objects before they can even walk properly. Levitation's practical outbursts should go without saying. It allows the user to move any object from one place to another while spending virtually no physical effort. I'm sure none of you stood there dragging your suitcases up the stairs of the rest of the towers last night. You simply lifted them with magic and carried them along as if they were no heavier than those sheets of paper on your desk right now. He grinned. Now, it's one thing to be able to hold a bunch of objects. It's another entirely to be able to differentiate between them while you're holding many at once. Tell me, if I were to give you a stack of dishes and dining utensils, do you think you could set a table using nothing of magic, while holding all the objects in your aura simultaneously? No hands went up this time. I thought not. Ha ha ha! One thing we will be covering in this class is delicate and intricate use of levitation for handling many objects at once. He turned back to the board, circling the second letter. Now, the first I in NIMT stands for another very common type of magic. Illumination! Illumination, in its most basic sense, is the conversion of your raw magical energy into the form of visible light. Interesting, magical energy seems to be very similar in wavelength to length to light. So this spell is much easier than producing some other type of energy, like, say, fire. A few students experimentally cast a bit of light from their horns, spreading haphazard beams of various colors around the room. Dinky watched beams of her own yellow light, mixed with Clarity's cinnamon and Honeydews pale green. For reasons that unicorn researchers are still trying to determine, a pony's magical aura and the light they produce are both precisely the same color as their eyes. Professor Morningstar pointed out, unless you go with the first season. We assume that for a while, that since latent magic is stored somewhere in the skull, the color was simply reflected in your eyes. But if that's the case, then what gives Pegasi and Earth ponies their eye colors? It's still a mystery. Some of our professors at this academy have written papers on the theories, though. Now the professor circled the M on the board. M stands for manipulation of objects. At first, that might sound strikingly similar to levitation, no? A few had nodded. Well, it should, the professor cried. Levitation is typically involved in manipulating objects. But this field goes further than simply picking objects up, moving them, and placing them down again. Manipulation allows you to use an object, held in your magic to accomplish something. With practice, the amount of dexterity a unicorn can gain from this far exceeds the net of most Earth Pegasi or Earth ponies. The professor picked up a small box on his desk with magic, and to Dinky's surprise, he placed it right in front of her. "All right, miss, you've been selected," he announced. "This is a music box. Try to turn the little wind-up key on the back using only your hose." Dinky looked at the box. Although her hose were much smaller than Professor Morningstar's, they still seemed large and ungainly compared to the delicate brass key. She turned the box on its side, placed both hoses around the crank, and after a few moments, and some awkward shifts of her shoulders, she managed to turn it once or twice. A few sad, tinkling notes played before the box fell silent again. "Lots of effort for very little payoff, wouldn't you agree?" the Professor asked, tackling the black box as Dinky nodded. "Small, intricate work is often almost completely off limits to Earth ponies. Some find using their mouth to accomplish tasks is often a bit easier than hooves." The stallion kicked forward suddenly, and flipped over its wheel stand, and revealed a chalk sketch of a Pegasus on the back. "Pegasi have it somewhat easier," he continued. "Many of them have learned to use their wings as manipulative appendages, a bit like overgrown versions of the hands or paws found on some creatures. But unicorns can match it with magic, what the other two ponies can typically struggle with." The professor lit his horn, and with a little flourish, spun the brass key several times, and a beautiful melody flowed from the music box. "Ding! It's just a little old music box, and that little old music box plays that means I love you." Bloop. That was just weird. "We will be practicing manipulation at length in this class," he said, setting the decorative box down again, and giving the chalkboard another quick kick to flip it back to his acronym. Dinky sat at her desk, pondering how magical manipulation of objects would make certain tasks easier. The first example that sprang to her mind was the dress shop owner Rarity, who used magic to handle scissors, thread needles, and intertwine pieces of fabric while she worked. Suddenly, the filly was able to understand the tailor's ability to make several beautiful pieces of clothing in the span of a day. She was clearly a master of manipulating small objects magically. "Now, we get to the fun stuff," Professor Morningstar chuckled. "The second I in limit stands for illusion!"
Trixie? Is that? Yep. That is Trixie's Uncle Morningstar."
"I thought as much." Dinky smirked and cast a sidelong glance at Clarity. The gray filly sat up straighter at the mention of that particular type of magic. "Now, illusions are one field that extends beyond just practical uses," the professor admitted. "We're going to cover them in the class because, while their effect may be very different, they actually stem from the same type of magic as simple illumination spells." The comparison led to a few moments of confusion for many of the students. "Some of you are no doubt wondering how a spell that can create illusion is generated to simple light generation," the stallion said. "And the answer is simple. An illusion spell has no effect on the object it is cast upon. It merely creates the appearance that the object has been modified. It fools the sense of sight, nothing more."
"And everything we see is based on how the light reflects off of it,"
said one excited filly. "Exactly, dear," Professor Morningstar said with a smile. "An illusion spell modifies wave light flames pertaining to a certain object, causing ponies to perceive it differently from its natural appearance." The professor's horn flared, and his coat cycled through all the colors of the rainbow for a few seconds before coming to rest on its original green. The shenanigan gathered a few laughs from the class. "Illusions range from simple things like color change to much more complex spells, like creating an image of an object that's not actually there, or turning a real object totally invisible. And, though they have a whole range wide of uses, ponies with particularly strong eyes or sharp minds can often tell there's an illusion at work." Dinky noticed Clarity grinning. The gray filly underlined strong eyes or sharp minds in her notes. "Now, let's move on to the one you're all waiting for," the professor said, dramatically drawing a big circle around a T in his acronym. The last type of practical magic, and by far the most complicated to cast, is teleportation! There were a few delighted eyes from the students, Dinky and Clarity among them. Even Honeydew seemed engrossed enough to forget her usual nervousness for a bit. It's an exciting prospect, isn't it? The professor asked, sounding almost as giddy as the students seemed to be. One moment, you're standing in one location, and just a fraction of a second and a flicker of magic later, he disappeared suddenly, and a burst of bright magic reappeared in an instant layer at the back of the class. You're somewhere else entirely, he finished. The students cheered as the professor strode back towards the front of the room.
This is so cool, Clarity said to Dinky. Imagine it. You could be anywhere in an instant.
Professor Morningstar laughed as he overheard Clarity's comment. Don't get ahead of yourself, he chided. Teleportation is very useful, but it's not quite as unlimited as it first appeared. He kicked the chalkboard, and it flipped again. Somehow, the drawing of a Pegasus had been replaced with notes and diagrams on the mechanics of teleportation, much to the bewilderment of the students. Teleportation, believe it or not, also uses similar magic to levitation. At first, that may not seem to make any sense at all. He scanned the room for a moment. You there! He called, pointing to Honeydew. Remind the class, what exactly does levitation do? Honeydew clearly did not want to be put on the spot, but she managed to mumble a response. Unfortunately, it wasn't loud enough for even the ponies sitting right around her to hear her, let alone the professor. Strangely, he smiled and nodded at her muted reply. That's right! Levitation is used to move an object from one place to another with magic. Teleportation, believe it or not, is pretty much the same thing, except you're moving yourself rather than the object, and indefinitely fast. He pointed to the board. Now, using magic to move oneself is, for some reason, much more difficult than using the same spell to move another object. The longer the spell needs to be maintained, the more energy it consumes. That's why you don't see unicorns using magic to fly along with the Pegasi. The toll it would take on the unicorn's stamina is so astronomically high, it would simply be impossible to maintain for more than a minute or two, and it would lead to caster dangerously exhausted for a long time after.
Then how did you... Oh, very simple. I simply manipulated my magic to continue feeding a constant stream of mana into my levitation magic while being able to focus on spells. Sadly, this means I could only keep my magic going for so long. Luckily, I was able to use the map to boost my mana supply indefinitely.
Oh? The professor cleared his throat when he noticed a few students exchanged clearing looks. But we're getting off topic here. Teleportation is a form of self-levitation, but it only needs to be maintained for an instant, so it doesn't put substantial pressure on the user's body, since the magic output needed is comparatively low. The trade-off is that you need to transport yourself beyond any measurable speed, which, as you might expect, requires its own fairly significant energy input, but is still well worth it. Moving at a speed that cannot be attained by non-magical means has the added benefit of allowing you to ignore the laws of physics that govern everything else, which also allows you to teleport through solid objects and appear unharmed on the other side.
So, you can't just teleport anywhere because of the amount of magic used?
Clarity asked. Correct, the stallion replied. The further you want to teleport, the more magic you expend. As you no doubt notice, using magic in excess, without allowing it to build up again within you, will begin to sap your physical strength. So, teleporting repeatedly or trying to teleport a very long distance will leave you completely drained. Once again, the professor flipped the chalkboard to his acronym. 5 types of magic. Levitation, illumination, manipulation of objects, illusion, and teleportation, he summarized. Together, these 5 spells form the basis of world magic. It's because of these skills that unicorns have been able to make such great strides in equestrian development and culture over the last 1,000 years. Simple as their purposes may be, these are spells which used to build the great city of Canterlot. Mastery of all 5 will leave little that one can't accomplish.
He got his front hose together. And so, I do not see any reason to stop practicing now. The other half of the classroom has been cleared out to make a practice arena. I'll be available if you need any help or have questions. So for the remainder of the class period, I'd like you to all start practicing levitation and illumination spells at whatever level is challenging for you. Now, get to it! Now, you see, it sounds like this. I'm glad I'm a Pegasus. Otherwise, this would be really, really complicated. Luckily, all I had to study was weather manipulation, which I failed at. And this is why I own a bookstore. What has my life become? A few minutes later, the professor had unloaded hundreds of assorted objects of various sizes from her closet, set the foals loose to begin an open practice period. Dinky, Clarity, and Honeydew immediately regrouped in one corner of the arena. Professor Morningstar seems really awesome, Clarity observed. He's really passionate about this stuff, even if it's just run-of-the-mill magic, compared to what we'll probably be learning in the other classes. So, is this supposed to be more boring magic? Dinky asked incredulously. But the lecture was really interesting. Some of those more advanced spells weren't even mentioned in the book my tutor gave me. I wish we would try some of the illusion or teleportation spells today. Clarity sighed, her ears drooping slightly. I guess we wouldn't even be able to until we're professor in the easier spells, though. I like the professor, too, Honeydew chimed in. I don't think he actually heard my answer to his question. He just pretended it to because he could tell I was nervous. Well, we probably shouldn't get too comfortable, Clarity pointed out. Professor Morningstar works with first-turn students all the time. Some of the other teachers are probably not going to be quite so friendly and lenient. Honeydew frowned and nodded. Oh, girls, came Professor Morningstar's chipper voice as he tried toward the three fillies. He glanced at his clipboard, searching for their names. Let's see. Dinky, Clarity, and Honeydew, right? Shouldn't you three be practicing? Oh, hi, Professor, Dinky said. Sorry, we were just practicing a lesson. We'll get started now. The professor smiled. Oh, don't worry. You've got plenty of time. Besides, your first day of class can be a lot to take in, so I don't blame you for wanting to discuss it a little. Have the three of you had a lot of practice with this type of magic before? All three fillies nodded. Well, let's see it then. The professor coaxed. One of you, go ahead and pick up as many objects as you can. Clarity gave Dinky a little nudge, and the purplish filly stepped forward. Her eyes fell upon a big pile of simple wooden blocks stacked next to the professor, and one by one she began to lift them into the air. For a while, it was easy. Dinky had carried more than a dozen books around Twilight's library before, and only near the beginning of her training had there been a tremendous spell for her. Within a minute or two, she was holding double that number in the air around her. But as Dinky began to try to add more blocks to the cloud of them, already suspended in the air, she was beset by a curious sensation. It was almost as if her mind was receiving a kind of feedback from the other blocks, a wordless plea for her attention. She was able to continue lifting new blocks in the air, but the strange, non-focal cry came harder and harder to ignore. Soon, Dinky found it difficult to keep her attention focused on each and every one of the objects held captive in an aura. She had to strain to concentrate hard enough to hoist the next block. Some of the others faltered as he did so. The feeling it produced was odd. It was extremely painful, but it was quickly overwhelming to Philly found herself unable to give the proper attention to any one block in order to keep the others afloat. Dinky grunted in frustration, tried to lift the next one off the pile, but she reached some sort of breaking point. Her magic sputtered and went out. All the blocks drifted from the air at the moment they were all caught, simultaneously by the professor, who sent them gently down. Just one shy of 3 dozen, the stallion said, nodding approval as Dinky tried to catch her breath. Slightly above average. Keep practicing that same procedure, and you'll find that number will go up. By the end of the term, students are expected to manage at least 100. 100? Dinky gasped. She knew it was already likely that unicorns had even greater powers of concentration than other ponies, but splitting one's attention 100 ways at once seemed all but impossible. "It's not as hard as it sounds," the professor said soothingly. "You'll find that as you continue to practice, your mind will gradually get used to the demand for multiple target concentration. We use levitation as the typical spell to practice that skill because it requires less energy than other spells."
"Oh," Clarity cut in, "so just because Dinky could lift 3 dozen blocks doesn't necessarily mean she could, I don't know, cast 3 dozen illusions at once, even if she knew how to do an illusion spell."
"Trixie?"
"You should see Trixie on her good days."
The professor nodded approvingly. "Now you're getting it. This class is not only for mastering these simple spells, it's also a sort of training regimen to increase your magical endurance so spells you learned about in other classes that require vast amounts of energy become more manageable."
Clarity smiled, and the teacher returned a grin.
"You seem to know your facts pretty well," he chuckled. "I guess you've been practicing with your sister."
"Clarity, let me tell you a lesson that I learned from a very awesome movie. Your legacy is more than just a name. There's a difference between knowing who your father is, or who your family are, and actually becoming who that is. Trust me, that movie was awesome."
The grin dropped off Clarity's face immediately.
How did you know about my sister?"
"The professors have all lists of students, of course," he said. "I'm sure a lot of the staff here will be delighted to meet Lucid's sibling."
Clarity flattened her ears against her head. "Yeah, they'll be thrilled."
There was a last crash as an occult's magic fizzled out and scattered the object he had been levitating all over the floor. The professor darted away to help clean up, leaving the fillies alone again. Dinky and Honeydew walked up next to Clarity, whose perkiness had once again slipped away at the mention of her sister.
"Clarity, are you okay?"
Honeydew asked quietly.
"Well, I'm not exactly ecstatic about that news," Clarity said with a pout. "Looks like all teachers already know I'm Lucid's little sister. So much for starting fresh. Their expectations for me have nowhere but to go but down now." "Oh, don't be like that," Dinky carried. "Professor Morningstar recognizes that we're all new students. He's not going to expect you to be a master of magic on that first day, just because your sister was one when she graduated."
Clarity looked across the room, where the professor was offering some friendly advice to a cult about the strength of his illumination spell. He didn't seem all that concerned that the student wasn't able to cast more than a light glow.
"Maybe you're right," Clarity admitted. "It's the first day of class. I shouldn't let myself get all worked up about my sister's rep before I even get started." "Good," Dinky said, relieved to restore her friend's optimism. "Now, come on. Let's see how many of these blocks you can lift at once." The remainder of class seemed to fly by. Another hour passed before the bell rang, and the trio trotted out of the classroom, already discussing their next practice session. "That was more fun than I thought it'd be, ha ha ha!" Clarity laughed, "especially near the end, we were trying to stack the blocks higher than each other." "Honeydew be as tough as that," Dinky reminded her. She turned and smirked at Honeydew, who blushed a bit. "You can hold a lot more objects at once than I think you can, though," the pig filler muttered shyly. "Well, a couple more classes will fix that right up, and I'm totally winning if we play the stacking challenge again next week." As her friends bantered, Dinky opened her salad bag and carefully removed the magic guides she'd been using during her tutoring. No wonder she mastered elven spells easily. Her very first class at the Magic Academy had already demanded more from her than her books guide lessons ever had. Dinky supposed the guide was written with the average unicorn foal in mind, rather than students at a prodigious school, but it had already been helpful nonetheless. Dinky began to make her way down the hall, her nose tucked in the levitation of her old guy. She only got a few steps when she paid the price for being distracted by crashing right into the rump of another pony. "Oh, sorry," she squeaked, embarrassed. The other filly said nothing. Instead,
He turned slowly around, and his angry, slate-blue eyes locked on Dinky's. Philly felt herself shrink under the stare she already knew too well.
Oh, Scuffle! Sorry about that. I'll be more careful next time, I promise.
Scuffle snorted.
Hey, you're one of the skinny fillies from the train, he said. Oh, and I see your little friend is back there, too.
Clarity, despite her apprehension, trotted over to back Dinky up. Honeydew, understandably, didn't want to get involved and just remained behind.
Just leave us alone, Scuffle, Clarity said. We aren't bothering you.
Scuffle smirked at the great filly.
Your friend ran right from my behind, he said. If he's trying to pick a fight, I'd be happy to oblige.
He lurched forward, laughed as both fillies squeaked with fright, and backed up a step. His eyes fell upon the book Dinky had been carrying. Obviously, he picked it up in his aura and examined the cover.
Beginner's magic, huh? He said finally. Well, that's convenient. The professor wasn't impressed with my levitating skills in class just now. Says I need to practice the basic more. Guess I'll be holding on to this for a while.
Scuffle unceremoniously stuffed the guide into his own saddlebag, and listening a cry of outrage from Dinky.
You can't just think that. It's mine.
Scuffle raised an eyebrow.
So,
It's not for you. Give it back.
you want it back? Scuffle asked mockingly. Come on then, take it back. I dare you.
For a moment, Dinky had almost considered stepping forward, using what little magic she knew to give the colt a piece of her mind. But at that moment, Scuffle's older brother trotted around the corner at the end of the hall, having just returned from their enchantments class. Even on the off chance that he could overcome Scuffle, she certainly didn't stand a chance when his magically adept older siblings were around. She frowned and backed off.
That's what I thought, Scuffle smugly. Now, stay out of my way, losers.
Scuffle turned and galloped towards his brothers, and the three of them disappeared down another corridor, taking Dinky's beloved book with them. Dinky slumped defeatedly back onto her haunches in the middle of the hallway. Clarity sat down next to her. Honeydew, deciding it was safe to approach, carefully trotted over to them.
Well, you were right.
The pink filly mumbled.
He's quite a bully. Who did you say he was again? Yeah, it was Scuffle.
Dinky mumbled.
Clarity and I met him on the train, but he's nothing but a pink bully who likes to pick on the other first years.
She sighed.
And now, he's got my book. Who knows if I'll ever get it back now?
It's not that big of a deal, is it? Clarity asked. You already knew how to do everything in that little guide. You don't even need it anymore.
That's not the point! My tutor gave me that book. It was the only way I could practice while not in my lessons. I wouldn't even be here today if that guide hadn't helped me master the basics in such a short time. It means a lot to me.
Dinky felt her anger dissolve into sadness. She didn't want to start crying right there in the hallway, so she changed the subject.
Come on, let's just go get some lunch. We can figure out if it's possible to get the book back later.
Without looking back, she made for the dining room. Clarity and Honeydew glanced at one another, and then followed quietly along. The afternoon sun hung over the class at the academy. A number of students sat outside, reading through the first chapters of the new textbooks, or simply enjoying the pleasant weather. Indoors, the girls examined their schedules over a plate of dainty sandwiches.
My schedule says I don't have another class today,
Dinky said, peering at the large free period right in the Monday column.
Really? I do, Clarity replied. A class called Magic and History, to be precise.
I have that today, too,
Honeydew said.
Do you have that class, Dinky?
Dinky scanned the color-coded paper.
Oh, here it is. Looks like I have it on Wednesday afternoons instead of Monday.
We'll catch you up with after class then, Clarity said. Try not to worry about that jerk Scuffle too much. We'll figure out how to get your book back another time.
Clarity hopped down from her chair and made for the door. Honeydew gave Dinky a brief nod in farewell before following Great Filly out the hall. Dinky continued to munch on her sandwich, chewing slowly as she tried to figure out how to spend the afternoon.
I know,
she thought.
Mom is probably wondering if I'm here okay. I should write her a letter.
Filled with a new sense of purpose, the filly swallowed the last bit of Daisy's sandwich, and then headed for the residence tower.
Dear Mommy, I'm writing to you all the way from Celestia's Academy. I wanted to let you know that I'm doing fine so far. The school is beautiful, and the professor I had for class today was very friendly. And I already made friends with friends too. Tell Mr. Breeze and Miss Twilight I said hi, and I can't wait to see them all again on Saturday. Lots of love, Dinky.
Dinky sat down to quill and looked over her note. Her handwriting had never been particularly good, but it was certainly more legible than her penmanship when she tried to hold the quill with magic. There was a whole chapter in her practical magic textbook on writing with magic, though, so she expected that would soon change. The filly wrapped a simple note in a piece of ribbon, but before she could even leave her dorm room, a thought occurred to her.
Where do I need to go to meal stuff anyway?
Dinky thought hard, but she couldn't recall seeing any mailboxes on the academy campus, or, for that matter, any Pegasus to pick it up. Dinky wandered down the stairs into the lobby of the filly's tower, but there didn't seem to be any sort of receptacle set aside for mail. Dinky noticed Sparkle's door was open just a crack. She tried over to the door, concealing the overseer's suite, and knocked lightly.
Come in.
Dinky pushed open the door and looked around the overseer's suite. The room was about as large as the one she was staying in, but instead of 3 ponies, it held only 1. Sparkle was lying on her stomach on the large bed, her nose buried in a copy of a very thick textbook entitled Enchantment Enhancement, a complete guide to the use of runes to contain and amplify spells.
Hello, Sparkler.
Dinky said tentatively, not entirely sure the older student was paying any attention. Sparkle looked up from her book. Oh, it's you, she said, flaunching a brief sterile smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sorry, I don't think I caught your name last night.
I'm Dinky Doo,
Dinky replied.
Sorry to bother you, but I have a question.
That's what I'm here for, Sparkle said, flipping through her textbook rather than looking at her visitor. Dinky tried to not put her best to be put off by the overseer's indifference.
I want to mail a letter, she explained, but I'm not sure where I need to go to send it. There aren't any mailboxes in the tower.
Oh, said Sparkler. Yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that last night. I knew there was something I was forgetting. A purple glow surrounded her horn, and a small map of the Academy's campus levitated over to her. She beckoned to Dinky and pointed to one of the buildings surrounding the castle. You just need to go here. Just give your letter to the postmaster, Twinkletoes. He'll send it to you right away.
Twinkletoes? Dinky thought. That's a funny name for a pony. All right, thank you,
the filly said, memorizing the location indicated on the map. No problem, Sparkler said, returning to her book without so much as a have a nice day. Dinky waited, but Sparkler said nothing else. After a few moments, she turned and trotted from the room. Sparkler's professional attitude was quickly forgotten as Dinky exited into the castle grounds and turned her focus forward toward the building the overseer had suggested. It was a gray stone structure at the end of the cobbled pathway, and it seemed suspiciously large for a building that apparently only functioned as a post office for a few hundred students. Dinky's magic commanded the doors to open, and they obeyed, allowing the filly inside. In contrast to the other buildings, this one's interior was strangely dim. Perhaps even more curiously, there didn't seem to be any pony around.
Hello?
Dinky called as he walked further inside the large room. Surely, there had to be a reception desk or an office somewhere. But the chamber appeared to be completely empty. There was nothing to see save for 3 plain stone walls, and one wall that appeared to be decorated with some sort of pinkish overlapping title. Convinced that Sparkler must have directed her to the wrong building, Dinky turned to go. She only had taken a few steps or two toward the door when a tremendous BOOM echoed throughout the room behind her, followed by a loud, deep voice uttering something in a foreign tongue that was more than likely expletive. Dinky wheeled around just in time to see the tiled wall begin to shift and twist about, It took a few seconds to grasp the concept that she was not looking at a part of the structure at all, but a scaly, shifting bulk of a truly massive creature.
Blast it!
The booming voice said.
I fully got learn not to sleep like that. I bang my head against the Celestia retard wall every day!
From somewhere behind the massive scales in front of Dinky, a long neck topped with a huge horn head lifted into the air. The creature snorted, and a telltale puff of smoke blew from its nostrils, confirming it was exactly what Dinky had suspected.
A dragon! It's a full-ground dragon!
For an instant, Dinky considered bolting, until a little voice of reason in the back of her head reminded her that there would not be a dragon on the Academy campus if it was dangerous in any way. Nevertheless, she made sure she was just a few feet from the door before speaking up again.
Hello, Mr. Dragon?
The dragon blinked and lowered its head towards Dinky. The filly flinched as its massive snout came within just a few yards of hers.
Well, hello there.
The dragon said, his gnarled lips curling to reveal a toothy grin.
I don't recognize you. You must be one of the new fillies who moved in yesterday.
Yeah.
Said Dinky, doing her best not to appear intimidated.
You want me Twinkle Toes with you?
The dragon laughed coarsely.
Personally, I am.
He said,
I was quite the nimble little fellow in my younger years. So, the party who raised me thought it was appropriate. He knew, of course, that once I grew up, the name would become ironic rather than accurate. But perhaps that adds its own level of humor.
The dragon laughed, but stopped when he noticed the smoke he produced was making things uncomfortably warm for Dinky.
You were raised by a pony?
She asked, blowing away the smoke with a hoof.
Oh yes.
Twinkletoes replied, his eyes sparkling with fond memories.
He was the dean of this academy some 300 years ago.
Well, if he's gone, why are you still here?
Dinky asked.
I like this place.
The dragon said simply.
These unicorns are friendly, and I've got enough to eat and a place to sleep. And all I have to do in return is send me a mail. Not a bad deal if you ask me.
So, you are the male dragon?
Dinky stuttered.
Can you send a letter for me, please?
Sure. All I need is the recipient's name.
It's a letter from my mom, Dinky said. Her name's Doo.
Twinkletoes reached for some dark corner of the room and picked up a book. It was a massive publication. Dinky was pretty sure it was bigger than she was. Even so, it was tiny when clutched between the claws of a dragon, 100 times her size. He set it down and began to delicately foot through the pages with one claw, leading Dinky to believe that perhaps his name wasn't as ill-deserved as she had first thought. Please tell me he also has a pair of teeny tiny reading glasses.
This is a Lazy Questions consensus, complete with pictures.
Twinkletoes explained.
Equestria doesn't have a whole lot of male dragons, but those of us who do work for the Postal Service each have a copy of this book, so we know who to send it to.
He pointed to a picture on one of the pages.
Is this her?
Dinky looked at the photograph of the gray and blonde mare and nodded in assent. Twinkletoes smiled.
It says she's a former mail pony. I wonder if she's already familiar with Brigade mail.
With what could only be described as extreme delicacy, the dragon picked up the tiny, ribbon-bound letter from Dinky's hoof with the tip of his claws, held it to his lips, and blew a tiny wisp of flame over the parchment, transforming it into a cloud of green light that floated out the door into the sky.
That should get to Ponyville within a few minutes.
Twinkletoes rumbled contently.
Dragon's mail is the most efficient method of message transport in Equestria. If you ever want to send anything else, just stop by. I'm in here all day.
I will, and thank you.
Dinky called as he made for the door. Twinkletoes watched the filly disappear. Then with a loud moan, curled up and went back to sleep. Clarity rolled on the grass, kicking her hose in the air gleefully, threatening to laugh her tail off. Sparkler didn't tell you Twinkle Toes is a dragon. Dinky pretended to pout, but she didn't hide her own smile when her friend was so mirthful. Dinky, Clarity, and Honeydew were lounging by a pond at the edge of the forest, relaxing in the orange rays of the evening sun. Honeydew, as usual, seemed content to listen to her friends discuss the day, and busy herself, instead of tossing breadcrumbs she saved for dinner, into the water, watching the fish scrambled up to gobble them. Even the shy filly seemed to be chuckling to herself, though, as she watched her thoroughly entertained friend roll on the grass. Clarity got hold of herself, and secretly got to her hooves. She gave herself a good shake, flinging a few blades of grass and flexing to the dirt and air. I can't tell if Sparkler did that on purpose or not, she said finally. I mean, I probably would have been a little shocked too, if I hadn't been expecting to run into a dragon all of a sudden.
Maybe it was payback for the trouble we caused last night,
Dinky theorized.
Sparkler doesn't strike me as the kind of pony who'd do something like that. But then again, she's always so dull that I don't know what she's thinking.
Doesn't change the fact that it was pretty funny, Clarity said, ignoring Dinky's ignorant snort. I guess you could chalk another one up to the fact you don't have much prior knowledge of magic or this academy. Honeydew raised her hoof.
Well, I wouldn't have been expecting a dragon either, Clarity,
she admitted.
Not all of us have family members who have been here before, you know.
Yeah, that's true, Clarity replied. You know more magic than Dinky does, but I guess you aren't any more familiar with the place than she is.
We'll figure it out eventually, Dinky insisted. Until then, any heads up you could give us would be nice.
Well, here's a heads up for you right now. The sun's almost set, Clarity said. Let's get to the residence towers before we get into trouble. Dinky glanced at the sun, which was still poking over the horizon.
I guess you're right. We should probably read over the first chapter of the Practical Magic textbook anyway.
You think you have work to do? Clarity asked. Honeydew and I have to get started on an essay about the earliest uses of magic or magic in history. The Great Filly tried in place. Come on! I'll race you girls! Without waiting for an answer, she took off towards the castle. Dinky cried out indignantly, and she and Honeydew scurried after her. Two tiny blue eyes stared out from between the leaves of a thick shrub, watching intently as the three fillies disappeared from view. Their owner began to mutter to himself once again, as if confirming his own statements.
The grey one will not suit my purpose at all. No, she will not,
it hissed.
She knows far too much already. She'd not be fooled at all, she wouldn't. The pink one seems too cautious. Yes, she does. Much too cautious and not powerful enough.
The bush rustled as the creature concealed within quivered.
The purple one, though,
it continued, his voice no more than a raspy whisper.
The purple one shows promise. Yes, she does. With magic. Her magic may become strong enough to fulfill my desire before she even learns silly as a miss.
The bush shuddered violently as the creature reveled in the light.
I will have to watch the purple one. Yes, I shall. Maybe, just maybe, she is the one I've been waiting for.